And here we are in the fifth and final game of the Kegworth Codgers competition. And as you can see, I've kind of slipped down into mid-table, 2 wins, 2 defeats. That's exactly where you'd expect it to be, really. And playing from Pompey, Andy Gilbert with a Feudal German. Now, I think a Feudal German's an army that I'd taken to Germany last year and kind of struggled a bit with to make something out of. So given my Berbers were struggling a bit as well, it looks like a competition of 2 strugglers. But let's see how Andy put the list together for this particular competition. So here you go. Competent general, 4 impetuous elite knights. That's some real good quality there. Included general in it. He should be able to control them. The Teutonic knight, you kind of feel obliged to take that. It's very German, but it's being non-impetuous, it's a little easier to control. It works as a good wingman on one side of that particular block of, or unsubtle block of 4, and then a couple of mounted crossbowmen to widen that bit, or fill in or go as skirmishers. That's a pretty classic command. A lot of punch actually. 5 knights is probably on the big side for that. And then the strategist, giving more control over terrain, particularly useful for this army, I think. But this is a big old block of heavy infantry. 4 spearmen, 2 polearm, 2 mediocre pikemen, 4 light infantry crossbow. That's a good number of crossbow to screen, particularly the pikemen from shooting. But you're 8 wide of dangerous heavy infantry. That the pikemen and the polearm are pretty good against enemy foot. The spearmen obviously good against knights. It's got a lot of width as well. And then a smaller command that goes, looks like a terrain command really. 2 medium swordsmen, 2 more medium swordsmen, and a couple of bowmen to shoot out of it. So it really is 5 knights, 8 spearmen. It's 13 wide, and then it can occupy terrain as well. So I guess it's looking for a 13 unit wide block of open terrain to drive this sort of big punch through, and then occupy the terrain on either wing of it. So let's see how that table panned out. And ta-da! That's pretty much perfect for Andy, isn't it? Look at that. You've got a waterway down which narrows the table. There's what looks like a plantation there because it's got square edges. That must be a plantation. I've tried to break the table up a bit for my army, but it looks like the marsh has fallen over there. The field has fallen over there. I'm guessing I'm defending in the plains here, and you've got the army with a huge block of spearmen and pikemen in the middle. You've got the knights running down the side of the table, and then you've got your medium foot command, which I presume will be going or trying to get into here. And this really does show how small my army actually is in comparison. So I've got 4 spearmen, 2 Almugavars, and they're sort of slightly useless in this game, javelin men. So I've got 6 things there facing up against 8. I've got 1 extra spearman here, but he's got quite a lot to deal with. The 2 medium cavalry are going to have to deal with them as well, but the 2 bowmen are quite dangerous. And then I've got my 3 knights down by the river, and the crossbowmen against 5 knights. So I'm pretty outgunned, as you can almost literally see. That army stretches to there, and my army doesn't quite do it. With that as a weak link, that a gap, they're not great. These are not as good as those guys. It's going to be a tough battle, this one, I think, from the off. So here we go. A solid line of the Germans kind of starts to inch forward, keeps itself very coherent. It's got plenty of time. It's not going to change anything. There's no real need to swap or change any of these troops around. And my army is just sitting, waiting for it, looking what to do as a bit of a counterpunch. And so here I go. There's no real benefit to just sitting and waiting, given they're advancing in a solid line, and there is a bit of a gap here. So potentially, I'm going forward and trying to drift the spearmen over here so they're facing the knights. Concentrate my knights as well, so I can ideally get sort of knights and spearmen into this block of knights. Drift some of my other stuff to attack this end of the line, see if there's an opportunity to push anything through this hole, and I've brought those 2 elite medium cavalry around the back of the plantation to try and get into these medium infantry before they can cross this gap into the terrain piece. And I'm just leaving a hole in the middle, really, just trying to cover it with a skirmishing cavalry on the basis that these spearmen will struggle to kind of wheel around and chew up the flanks. But given I don't have as many and my stuff's not really as good, I'm much better off trying to attack the flanks and refuse the center than I am just trying to take them on centrally. Otherwise I'll just get outnumbered by more and by better troops. And here we go, going in. The knights have sort of stepped forwards quite a bit, and the crossbowmen are just exchanging fire with my crossbowmen. We're covering, yeah, there's the other light crossbowmen. So they're covering the knights away from my crossbow shooters, so I'm not able to quite get anything there. It looks like the light crossbow have done for my bowmen or injured my bowmen before I've got anything else there. But, you know, upside, I've got my supported spearmen facing off against knights. I've got an armoured spearman facing off against unarmoured spearmen. I've got people in this gap, and it does look like it's started to drag that big central block apart somewhat. Drop the bowman behind, he's a bit useless. These guys are ready to come in and fight as well, but that's still a bit of a risk in the middle of the table. And again, over on the other side, the armoured spearmen, the Almugavars, they've all drifted to the right, joined up with that spearman from that other command, really just trying to nip through this gap. But the Germans are rushing forwards in a big solid mass, and it does look rather tricky to get through there before that happens. So it will be really down to, you know, these guys are sort of better, but they're taking shooting hits from these light crossbowmen. My own light infantry are taking shooting hits as well. There's a lot going to be waiting on the Almugavars, who are going to go into the mediocre pikemen or maybe the spearmen, and my spearmen as well. I'm still somewhat outnumbered there. Looks unlikely they're going to squeeze through the gap because these have got good pips and race themselves forward. So here we are, looking at that. The light horse who are here, I've just pulled them out, a bit of a mess. Squeezed up again, squeezed up as much as I can. Left one the knights behind to try and match off here, because I think he's going to be needed as a reserve when that bowman gets run over. But you can see sort of the gap has opened up there, and the Germans are doing exactly the same to shuffle it. Possibly creates an opportunity for this medium horse, but a slightly kind of bigger view. And again, I pulled out a bowman to try and get these cavalry in, but I think chances are the Germans will be able to shut that door between the terrain and the end of their heavy infantry line and neutralize these cavalry. So that's kind of you know, trying to make the best of a bad job. So we're in. Look at this. We've got the knights fighting the knights. There's combat going on there. Unfortunately, I've been able to not been able to avoid having a knight go into my my medium crossbowmen, so they're going to be toast pretty quickly. But knights into supported spears, about as good as it gets for me. Knights on knights, my general's in here, so I'm getting my best troops possibly into it, but these guys are elite, and one of my guys isn't here. So let's have a look. Yeah, the crossbowman goes straight away, but fortunately I've got a knight lurking behind. As long as the general can do something about that. Looks like my spearmen have suffered a hit there as well, which is not ideal, but this one maybe hasn't against the Teutonics and the Germans. But big gap there. I need to quickly fill that, stop anything happening. Over here, yep, the Germans have managed to close that gap, and suddenly there's like 6 units running through this bit of terrain. I've got almost nothing in there because my terrain troops, the Almugavars, are having to go into the middle, otherwise we're just wildly outnumbered by this, as opposed to being wildly outnumbered by those in the terrain. You know, the mix, there's not really been the scope for my cavalry to get around anybody's flanks or do anything clever, so I'm just having to kind of withdraw them in the face, particularly of those 2 bowmen. So over in here, a bit more action on the other side. Yep, my reserve knight has gone in, plugged that gap where the bowman died, supported by light horse. My spearmen are still fighting away. It's not too bad. Looks like there's a marker possibly behind that one. There's definitely a marker behind. Yes, there is a marker behind that one. There's a marker behind that one. So my guys are doing all right here. The spearmen are holding up, using the overlap. I'm still plugging a gap here with medium cavalry. Not great. It's just about starting to work. So there's positivity here, upside. But then in the next turn for the Germans, they suddenly do 2 hits on the end. You really don't want those hits on the end. That's where there's ability for this knight potentially, if it wins, just to come around and start rolling up the line. This spearman is starting to sag, but this one has won. This one's killed its opponent, gone forwards, gotten into the end of this heavy spear line. So I've got armoured spear against unarmoured spear. He's in a good position to turn onto a flank if this guy survives long enough. Now he's taken 2 hits, so it's nip and tuck. It's nip and tuck, and this is about as good an opportunity as, you know. That's sort of my plan. Get my spearmen and knights into the enemy's knights and start to grind them down. In the middle, beautiful picture coming up here. Loads of colour. We've got the Almugavars into the mediocre pikemen. 2 all, but I'm elite. They're mediocre. Should hopefully grind them down. Got my armoured spear into a spearman. I just haven't quite got enough stuff to keep overlaps out of the way. Got my supported spear on the other end of the line. Unfortunately, the javelin are having to fight, which is not great, but you can still see these hordes of Marines and other people flooding through the woods as this battle goes on in the middle. So that's kind of important. But this was the point at which we were rolling dice, and then Paul, the man of metal, came over again with yet another heavy metal medieval themed band, and this was Moat Party with their legendary album, obviously inspired by the Beatles and Abbey Road. Which is wet, loud, and medieval, perfect for Moat Party and that castle there. So let's just have a quick look and tell you a bit more about, or relay some of Paul's stories about Moat Party. So Moat Party are very much on the experimental end of medieval heavy metal music, which is a pretty niche sort of end. They don't actually rehearse or really play music as such. They just fill a moat and see what happens when they drop all of their amplifiers into it, and just then play around with the feedback, really. That's it. And every show ends with at least one amplifier disappearing into the muddy depths of any moat near a castle in which they play. That's what actually led to, I'm told, or Paul told me, there are t-shirts out there that you can buy with this logo on. We don't drain it, we drown in it, is their motto. It's their strapline. Their key albums, which, if you gain some of the top, this is based on top plays on Spotify. You're seeing here Wet, Loud and Medieval. There's also Cannonballs and Cannonball Shots, and finally Keep the Drawbridge Down, which is a very early, very, very experimental one. But they've only got 3 albums, so it still is the 3rd most popular. So your quick fact, again, looking on Wikipedia, I discovered this about Moat Party. They actually call their own music aquatic sludge metal as a subgenre. And the other quick fact is they're currently banned from 40% of National Trust properties in England and Wales. So let's have a quick listen to a bit of Moat Party. So yeah, that's Moat Party. Rock and roll. Let's get wet in the moat, and let's get back to the battle. To be honest, after Paul had to go back and play his, and as I horrendously predicted, the German knights have got through on the end. They've killed the final knight. That creates a bit of a problem. It looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4 there. That would have been my spearman, the one that was on 2 hits. It's now been killed. That's allowed the knight to come through. I can't really just run away, otherwise I've just got too much stuff here, and there's still an opportunity for me here. That does look like a marker on that spearman, so the light horse are just toughing it out. They're going to die. They're going to be beaten, but they might have fled off table and just left a huge opportunity. And I'm desperately trying to get through this first. In the middle, you can see I've picked up a marker there. There's some markers behind the spearman, so it's sort of, again, nip and tuck. But this bit with, effectively, let's count him as dead, 4 knights here surrounding my 2, that's going to be done for pretty quickly, I think, and then that will get those knights, those 4 enemy knights, into the end of this line. In the middle, the Almugavars have done well, slightly unsurprising, I guess, against the pikemen. 2 hits there, 1 hit there against the pikemen. My spearmen are doing okay here, but of course the javelinmen just aren't anywhere near as good as enemy spears. They're 2 hits down. And rather surprisingly, this armoured spearman against a normal spearman is 3 hits down. He's taken a real pasting with the support of this crossbowman. And Halberdiers, I can't really do too much more with this javelinman. He can't charge forward, otherwise he'd be going into this guy and would just get chewed up, almost certainly. And I've taken a few hits around the back. So a few holes potentially appearing in this line. And there they are. There's a hole in the line. There's a hole in the line. Suddenly that makes the Almogavars look a little bit surrounded. And I just don't particularly have much in the way of reserves to hold them on. This skirmishing cavalry, it's having us kind of sit there just to stop this guy turning onto the flank of my armoured spearmen who are joining in the fight over there. But suddenly there's just quality and quantity is better than my quality and quantity in the middle, and big holes are starting to appear. Over on the far side, looks like my knight actually has done well. Somehow this spearman must have killed off his opponent and has managed to turn into the flank of Andy's knights quicker than I expected was going to happen. So my knights have burst forwards. This guy's not had the opportunity to turn into the flank. Maybe his general's engaged, not enough command points. So this is actually working out okay, to be honest. We've lost one knight and a light horse, I think, and we've taken out 3 knights there. So that's actually a great result. But what are these guys going to do now? They're a long way from the battle. Over in the middle, the Almogavars have finally knocked a hole. They've taken down one of the pikemen, just been taken off the table. But my other spearmen here have been caught out by the Marines coming through the woods. So suddenly these Almogavars are the only combat troops left in this line, with people coming from all sides, people coming from the front, starting to surround them, and hits kind of ticking over everywhere else. There's just too many of these German medieval chaps roaming around. Looking back, you can see this is sort of desperate straits. All of my troops, in fact this guy may even have broken off and survived, but all my guys are just running away from the danger of these 2 knights, which not a lot I can, only a limited amount I can do about it. They're getting ready. There's going to be another excuse me, another fight there. And over in the middle, spearmen have gone into my medium cavalry, pushed their own spearmen back, but big holes there. I think you've got 2 Almogavars, 1 spear, another spear there, but it's really opened up in the middle of the table. Here it's still very cluttered. You're seeing all these troops flood through. The archery starting to force my light cavalry and other people back. The Almogavars are still going. These have not yet done too much. I'm desperately plugging in these medium cavalry to try and just occupy the attention of these guys and stop them hitting the flank of my Almogavars before we can get into these, hopefully overturn these pikemen who are looking very resilient. So here, back to this side, the knight, is that the general? It's not actually the general. The general must be dead. The knight and the spearmen are fighting a brave rearguard action here, supported by bowmen. Excuse me, over in the middle. Again, we've got into the flank of these spearmen. We're trying to occupy this guy with a rather dodgy medium cavalryman. Not ideal bringing these back in. So it's breaking down into lots of little nuggets of combat as flanks suddenly start to get exposed on both sides. A lot of risk and damage there for all sorts of things. So looking at it, despite being turned, what was that one? Yeah, this is someone I hit in the flank and in the front, and it looks like the one that I hit in the flank has turned round and then just killed my spearman outright, which is a little bit unfortunate. There appears to be no knight here, which is a little bit tricky as well. My bowmen racing forwards. My cavalry is starting to take hits. The Almogavars are starting to lose against the medium pike. And look at that big wall of stuff ready to come out and start shooting up my medium cavalry and bowmen. That's not great. And that wasn't great. That was the end of it. And this was the excuse me, was the final position, as I kind of sank down to kind of slightly below mid-table with up at the first 2, straight 3 defeats after that, pushing my opponents up into Andy there in that position. Let's see who else there was. Robin with a very good 5th position up there. Let me have a look at those. We got Paul Johnson sat there, and what do we looked? Where was the first one? Paul slightly below me there with the Feudal Spanish, getting his victories in the middle. So all in all, a pretty good event. And excuse me, as we were wrapping up, Paul came over yet again for the final time just to share with me literally what, they're all his favourite band. He gets very enthusiastic about all of them, but this was the real favourite, Sirloin and the Gravy Knights, and their album Medium Rare and Fully Loaded. So let's just tell you a bit more about Sirloin and the Gravy Knights. So Sirloin and the Gravy Knights were formed after a group of musicians got involved in a fist fight at a medieval dinner theatre, and that created Sirloin and the Gravy Knights. Now, originally they were known as the Knights of Gravy, but unfortunately a legal case from a very niche swingers club on the outskirts of Wolverhampton meant that they had to change their name back to the Gravy Knights, as the Knights of Gravy was already taken for another type of business. But their band vows to bring meat-based righteousness in a medieval form to the masses, which this was their debut album, Medium Rare and Fully Loaded, and they launched it with a guerrilla marketing campaign in which they managed to get it onto the playlists of several vegetarian cafes, only for a very short period of time though, and it led to them being banned from Radio 2 for the album just being simply too carnivorous. And their key albums, this one, Medium Rare Fully Loaded, the launch one, Battle Hymns for the Buffet line was a great follow-up, and the difficult third album was Meat and Metal Forever. Quite the right thing. So Wikipedia tells us that their specialist, or their niche fact, is that they tour in a converted food truck, which is of course named the Meat Wagon, and their drummer always does at least one solo during every gig using a turkey leg. So that is Sirloin and the Gravy Knights, and let's have a quick listen to them.